Many years ago, when I was even younger than I am today, I used to regularly conduct assemblies in our local primary school. On one occasion, I had been speaking to the children about the way that we look and that what is more important than our physical appearance is the way that we look on the inside, because that is the way that God sees us. Well, sometime later, I was having a conversation with the mother of one of the girls from the school who also attended our weekly Bible club, which we held in the village. She was telling me about a rather unexpected conversation she had had with her daughter as she was giving instructions for dressing appropriately before going out one day. All of a sudden, and completely out of the blue, the girl had turned to her mother and said, "You don't care what I look like on the inside, do you?" Well, I proceeded to explain to the mother about the assembly at school, which I assumed to have been the source of her daughter's thinking. I pled guilty, and whilst finding the whole matter most amusing, I was also delighted to know that something I had said had been taken to heart, and I'd rather like to think that it was a lesson she would never forget. Well, all of this came to my mind just the other day as I was watching an episode of a television series about the House of David. Although, like many of these productions, there's a great amount of dramatic license at work, it does generally follow the biblical account and certainly provides a great deal to think about. The episode in mind was, of course, that in which the prophet Samuel was called upon during the reign of King Saul of Israel to anoint young David as its future king. Here's how the story begins, as told within the pages of the first book of Samuel. In preparation for battle with the Philistines, King Saul of Israel had unlawfully offered a sacrifice contrary to the command of the Lord. Samuel arrives later than expected, meets Saul, and says, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. The Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom will not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has appointed him to be ruler over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." So, that was that. The days of his reign were numbered, as it were, and God has appointed another to be king. A little while later, we encounter Samuel again, this time in Bethlehem, at the house of Jesse. And God has instructed him to anoint one of his sons as the new king, in secret, of course. Well, the story continues. When the sons of Jesse came, Samuel looked on Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is before him." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Well, this was the basis of the school assembly all those years ago, and confirms the fact that what is more important than our physical appearance is what we look like on the inside. God is far less interested in our outward appearance than many of us might be. He sees people quite differently, and from the inside out. And what he sees often contradicts our first impressions and our own foolish judgments. The thing is, nothing is ever hidden from God. Way back in the days of Noah, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And maybe you're familiar with the 139th Psalm attributed to David, which begins, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit, or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you." And I wonder whether these thoughts brought to David's mind the words which he had first heard from Samuel the prophet at the time of his anointing. "The Lord sees not as man sees. The Lord looks on the heart." Years later, the prophet Isaiah would address the empty religion of the nation of Israel, and how that nothing had escaped the eyes of God. The Lord said, "Because these people draw near with their mouths and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me, and their worship of me is a human commandment learned by rote, so I will again do amazing things with this people, shocking and amazing. The wisdom of their wise shall perish, and the discernment of the discerning shall be hidden. Woe to those who hide a plan too deep for the Lord, whose deeds are in the dark, and who say, 'Who sees us? Who knows us?' You turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay? Shall the thing made say of its maker, 'He did not make me'? Or the thing formed say of the one who formed it, 'He has no understanding'?" God sees absolutely everything. He doesn't only see the things we do, but he sees the things we want to do, our deepest desires, however sordid or depraved they might be. Maybe we find that disturbing. Maybe we'd rather that God didn't know what was going on within our hearts and within our minds. Or maybe we find that something of a relief. Maybe we find some sense of comfort in knowing that we're not going to shock God. Yes, we do well to acknowledge or confess our wrongdoings before him, but it isn't that he doesn't already know about them, every last little detail of every one of them. We're not going to tell God about some wicked thought we've had or some evil deed we've done and then hear God say something like, "Really? Well, that changes everything." No. Later in David's eventful life, we encounter that unfortunate episode with Bathsheba and her husband Uriah the Hittite. You may remember how David had tried to cover up his wrongdoing by having Uriah killed in battle, but it was no good. Confronted by the prophet Nathan, David acknowledged his wickedness and turned his heart back to God. It wasn't that God was unaware of what he had done, of course not. But for David to find peace with God, he had to first acknowledge what wrong he had done. There can be no place for secrets or dishonesty when it comes to our relationship with God. A healthy relationship must be built on truth and honesty and trust. But for all kinds of reasons, we might choose to go it alone. And we do so at our peril. Listen to David's pain and anguish in trying to cover up his deeds. Blessed is the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord counts no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. For when I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groanings all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not cover my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the iniquity of my sin. Just like Adam and Eve in the garden, don't we sometimes find ourselves hiding from the glory of the presence of our Almighty Holy Father? Like David, have we not sought to cover up our wicked thoughts and deeds as if we might conceal them from the eyes of God? But bit by bit they eat away at us. Our bones begin to waste away through our groaning, and in time we can no longer bear the burden of our own wrongdoings. And then we remember that God already knows every one of our thoughts and words and deeds, and yet still he loves us and longs for us to come clean and turn ourselves back to him. Others may look at us and judge us, even condemn us, but God doesn't look at us as others look at us. God sees our heart, and he's looking for honesty and openness and a spirit that knows that our only hope lies with him. He already knows what we want. Not what we say we might want. He knows what we really want. He knows what lies behind all of our actions. so he understands our weaknesses. He's simply looking for hearts inclined towards him, for hearts that truly desire the ways of God above all else. But the heart can be the source of all that is evil. Listen to what God has to say of its deceitfulness through the prophet Jeremiah. Thus says the Lord, "Cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength, whose heart turns away from the Lord. He's like a shrub in the desert, and shall not see any good come. He shall dwell in the parched places of the wilderness, in an uninhabited salt land. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water, that sends out its root by the stream and does not fear when heat comes, for its leaves remain green, and is not anxious in the year of drought, for it does not cease to bear fruit. The heart is deceitful above all things, and desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind, to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds." Can you hear Jesus much later, knowing their thoughts, saying, "Why do you think evil in your hearts?" And then saying, "You've heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery,' but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart." On one occasion, when Jesus encountered some of the religious people who had a rather unhealthy concern for hand washing, he said, "Hear and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles a person." Well, of course, this offended the Pharisees, the religious people who attached great importance to their rituals and customs. But Jesus is concerned with things that cannot be seen, and he's not particularly concerned as to whether or not his words of truth cause any offense along the way. So he goes on to say, "Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth passes into the stomach and is expelled? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile anyone." So no, it really doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. What does matter is what you look like on the inside, for God sees the heart. As the Proverbs says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it."